So this is John Fetterman, and I wasn't able to figure out his type totally, but kind of thinking about this morning, I think he might be somebody close to Shaq's type, double masculine SETI, blast last. Don't put me down for that. That's not official. Shanny hasn't typed him. This is just my guess. I've not watched a lot of videos of this guy, but I think he's kind of coming from that side. Also would make sense with the gigantism, the SETI double masculines being 6'8", as well as kind of muscular and athletic. But that does seem to kind of run on that type a little bit. But anyways, it's a story about somebody who really is struggling with depression. And then also making that public. Like, he's sharing with people. He's like, yeah, I haven't showed up to the thing because I'm fucking depressed. So he's into politics and stuff like that. Now, you would think he'd be a Republican because he just wears like fucking tough guy jackets. And he looks like a big fucking thug. And he wears like shorts and sweatshirts. And it's just a very kind of non-professional look to him. But he's actually a Democrat. By the time this video airs in a month or two, like, you might be seeing somebody who's continually on the down drop. You know what I'm saying? Like, this doesn't look like this is going to be a story that is going to work out well. I can't imagine him being like, yeah, you know what? I snapped out of it. Everything's better. Usually when I see the dark depth of depression grab somebody this deeply, it usually goes down for quite a while. It's usually not a good ending. So let me just talk about that for a minute. The thing with depression, and having gone through it when I was younger, junior high and high school, I was severely depressed. Very dark, very, very, very depressed. Like, never got a break from it. That's what I remember. It was the unrelenting, always negative, just always on the verge of wanting to kill myself, just always dark, depressive. I think like the masculine FI savior intensity, like masculine FI goes bad. Like, I think it's one of the worst that I've seen as far as people go through depression. Like, some people will have kind of a break. They'll have good days and bad days. No, I didn't have any of that. It was just like all the way at the very bottom, like continually. It was very, very intense. And it was enough to really change the trajectory of my life forever. Adding some normalcy to it gives you some ground to stand on to possibly increase your chances of maybe not getting your ass kicked and losing. This isn't like a happy story where everybody like turns out okay in the end. Like, no, you got to respect that this is really hard stuff. That you can't just tell yourself or your friends and family, hey, just snap out of it. Hey, just take some natural herbs and, brush that cancer off. Just get rid of the COVID. Just things real easy. Like, things aren't real easy. Things can be really hard. And it's not only hard for yourself, but it's hard for the people around the depressed person, whether it's you causing stress on your loved ones or your loved ones causing stress on you. His wife seems to be taking a lot of the negative energy. She's trying to do her best. Like, that you see their friend that gets really depressed and you're trying to like, your life's already fucking hard enough. And then you're trying to work on overdrive to try and help them out. And then that starts bringing you down as well. But you can't show that you're down because then they'll be even more sad that they see that your sadness is bringing them down. Then they're going to be more sad, right? So I think she's ESFP. She SE-FI, Savior FI. She's very double decidery, and she's very masculine FI, and she's pretty funny. And so she's trying her best to kind of joke with him or be his friend and be there for him. And it's still, even if you have the greatest partner in the world, what it seems like for him, he's got a really great woman by his side. And it's like, it's still like just does fucking nothing. Which then he sees that, and then it makes him more depressed. Like, that's, like, if you're living in a fucking dumpster and everybody hates you, at least that kind of makes sense. But if you're living in kind of a nice place and you have a couple of loved ones, well, now you're like a double jerk. Because now you're fucking sad and you have great people trying to help you and that's still not working. Well, now you just feel even fucking worse, right? Like, I'm really seeing depression like AI and the COVID virus. You know what I mean? Like, we've lived through this time where like we've all learned about viruses, right? The past few years. We all have some understanding of viruses and vaccines. And now we're all learning about AI, and we're learning how this little thing can turn into this big thing, and it gets a runaway, and how it starts to learn, and it learns, and all this kind of shit. So I kind of feel like those little two NIs, like that's how I see depression as like the Venom and the Spider-Man movies. This dark, like little, like it gets in you, like, oh, just a little bit, and then just blah, 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 blah. And it creates a mind of its own that starts fucking with your systems. And what I'm describing, it sounds crazy, but it's actually very accurate to how like real doctors and real psychologists would describe it. It's like, yeah, it's a set of like complex beliefs and self-destructive behavior and hormones that get out of balance. It starts messing with your chemicals. Like, it's a real fucking thing. It's not something that you just kind of snap out of. It's a real set of mechanisms and motions and viruses and then chemical imbalances that get set into motion that once they get their own rampage, like they like to go all the way through. There's a whole cycle it wants to run. And so it's a very, very serious thing. And so you see somebody like John, and you're like, well, how the hell? It's like, well, depression got him. Like, it got in there, and it's buried in there, and it's doing its thing, and this is what it fucking looks like.
And in November, John Fetterman won, flipping a Republican-held Senate seat.
I'm so humbled. Thank you so much, really. Thank you.
But there was something behind that smile.
It's like you just won the biggest, race in the country. And the whole thing about depression is that objectively, you may have won, but depression can actually convince you that you actually lost. And that's exactly what happened. And that was the start of a downward spiral.
In the interim between the campaign and being sworn in, at home in November, December, depression started gathering strength. Is that correct?
Very much, very much. I had stopped leaving my bed. I've stopped eating, dropping weight. I stopped engaging some of the most things that I love in my life.
How does this not sound like the fucking chicken pox? Now let me just unpack that. I don't mean that literally, but it's like, how does this not sound like a virus that you have to build an antibody to? When I talk to people, when I meet somebody, one of the first things I ask them, there's a few like sensor questions I'll ask, like their age or their parents or brothers and sisters, like kind of get some kind of their job, trying to get, who the hell are you? One of the first things I'm trying to figure out is, where was your depressive stage? And if they haven't had one yet, I'm like, oh, well. It's like, hey, have you had chicken pox yet? They're like, no. You're like, oh, fuck, wait, how did you not have chicken pox? Hey, did you get the COVID? No, but the vaccine is like, has the COVID gone through your system yet? Yes or no? Have you built antibodies to the COVID, to the flu, to the sickness, to the chicken pox, to depression? Huh? What are you talking about? Like, uh-oh. Like, to me, from what I'm seeing, as I'm watching the fucking Dumbass Tribe, as I'm watching all these fucking stories, as I'm seeing myself, seeing my friends and family, I know that I am really locking down to this before and after with depression in the hero's journey. Like, what is the bottom of the pit? Well, you're going to throw depression in there, and whatever's worse than depression, that's at the bottom. That's not wanting to live, wanting to die. Like, there you go. You're getting down. That's it. Because when a person gets down to the bottom of the hell, depression just being one of the horrible things along the way, it gets even worse than that too. You get existentialism, and like you can get fucking all the way down there. It's the few that can then keep going, and they have a reason, a purpose, a choice, etc., where they Jamie Lee Curtis decide, you know what, I'm going to come out the other side. I'm going to do something with this. And they have a point in time that they can point to. They're like, this is where I struggled with depression. And there's that mile marker. So what I'm saying is, there is a great joy if you ever had the COVID and then like you got through it. You're like, oh, fuck. I would never choose that, but I'm so glad I got the COVID, and then I now have antibodies, but that was 2 weeks of fucking hell, and now it's over. Like, that's how I see depression. Like, you don't want to get it, but you're so fucked if you haven't had it yet.
But he went to Washington, and on January 3rd was sworn in. People who know you say that day you looked miserable and lost.
Yeah, I was definitely depressed.
I think with depression, you're always waiting for, oh, that's the thing that's going to change it, right?
Giselle read as much as she could find about depression.
He just became the senator. He's married to me. He has amazing kids, and he's still depressed. Yeah. And I think the outside would look and say, how does this happen? But depression doesn't necessarily make sense, right? It's not rational.
Right. And look at her. Like, look at her trying to like double the side, trying to a masculine FI, make a joke. You know, this is my kind of humor. Like FI in the middle, savior FI. And he's married to me. And it's like, that's what makes it harder. Is like, he's like, my wife is fucking great, and I'm still sad and depressed. Like, this is what makes it even more sad and more hard. That the outside world really can't fucking help you. So put that on your list of things to fucking learn when you're at the bottom of hell. No one's coming to help you. Nobody can fucking save you from the outside. Because it's a virus, it's an antibody on the inside. You have to build your own self-generating antibodies from the inside out. And I'm seeing that more and more, not only with depression, but like with training people with like how to work on programs or work on systems or work on editing or work on something. It's like, I can say all this shit on the outside, or video typing, or, you know, all this stuff that we're teaching here. I can say and talk, and it just goes bonk, 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 bonk. This bounces right off your fucking head. Once you got to go do it, you struggle from the inside out. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you got to teach something to somebody else, you see that. So what I'm saying is the people that have made it through depression, which is not a lot of people. A lot of people, they get down there and then they come back up the hero's journey. They go back to townsfolk land. They're like, fuck this. Let me go back to drinking. Let me take all the weight off the bar. Let me go sneak away to the fucking woods. Let me go into a bunch of coping and just find entertainment. And they just move away from it. And they just kind of, they're your fucking neighbors, the old people across the street that just sit there in their fucking house. Like, those are somebody that hit depression and then never fucking conquered it and then just live like this the rest of their fucking life, right? So that's most people. And there's some that go, fuck this, and they get all the way through the other side.
Your trajectory from mayor to lieutenant governor, United States senator, was still pointing up. At 53 in politics, that's a young man. Can you have aspirations? Can you serve beyond the United States Senate?
You know, my aspiration is to take my son to the restaurant that we were supposed to go during his birthday, but couldn't because I had to check myself in for depression. And being the kind of dad, the kind of husband, and the kind of senator that Pennsylvania deserves. that's what my aspiration is.
So you see what he's saying? He's like, look, I can't, I don't even care about doing this anymore. And like what I see with people is like, you might need to take some time off. Like, what did you just say? I want to go to dinner with my family. Then fucking go to have dinner with your family. Like, what is stopping you from doing that? Well, I'm depressed and everybody's asking me to. I was like, hey, you got a no fucking win situation all the way around here. So what can you do to get yourself to start fucking moving? Don't try and solve jack shit. Just try and make things not worse. Maybe you need to cancel everything and go have fucking dinner and be like, look, I'm allowed to do that. Just something to get the chemicals moving. Just something to get the flow moving. Stop trying to solve it. Just try and get it to flow. So there's just the one thing that I would just leave you with is like having gone through severe depression when I was younger, just very, very bad. Really finding that it is something to look at to where it's a very normal thing. It's very normal. It's what I love about John. He's like, hey, yeah, I'm depressed. This is actually kind of normal. I want to share this with everybody. Because how many people that are like struggling with depression, they're like, well, I'm not allowed to say anything. Well, this isn't normal. Like 50-50. Half of the world is dark and negative and bad. Why are we not fucking sharing this? You're just going to bottle it up? Well, you think you're fucking special? It just makes it so much worse. The virus feeds off of that. When you hide it in the dark. God, you're just putting fucking gasoline on a fucking virus. Like, don't hide depression in the dark. Do what John's doing. Go in fucking 2020, talk to some fucking bird lady about depression, get it moving, go to the fucking restaurant. The point is, the bottom line that I'm seeing, to give you any speck of hope, is that it's something that I strongly believe everybody has to be able to get through somewhere in their life, hopefully. Otherwise, your life is fucking ridiculous. How the hell did you get protected from hard times? It's normal when you feel like, oh shit, I'm going down in the hardest of the hardest of the hardest time. Know that make it fucking worth it. Don't leave until you get your antibodies, until you get your breakthroughs, until you get because on the other side, just like with the damn COVID, what I'm hearing from people that have gone through it, I know this is true for myself, you're unable to be depressed ever again because you now know that game. Because you spent how many years in fucking hell until you realized, oh, here's how you get out of handcuffs. Go ahead, put me on any handcuffs you want. I can get out. Getting me any depressive situation, and I know how to get myself out. Not saying I won't have bad days, not saying I won't be knocked down for a couple of months, but you ain't never going to get me stuck in there again because I learned how to finally get out. You got to go through that yourself. You got to learn that yourself. You got to learn how to fight for yourself. That's what I'm seeing people do that finally make it through. So our thoughts and our prayers and our hopes for John that he keeps fighting and makes it fucking through.